Aloha friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. Getting ready to start a really big project. It's a doozy actually. It's a cool one, but it's a doozy. And I can't believe I bid this at roughly 10 hours work because seriously, I probably can't do it in 20 to 30 hours work, to be honest. It's really a big job. It's an old Gibson. It's an L model. I don't remember which model it is. I don't remember which one it is. The labels are missing on the inside, but this is one of the nicer ones. You can tell by the inlay around the sound hole. You can see it's been hacked over the years. Somebody probably put a pickup in it, which is really sad that they did that to a neat old instrument like this, but they did. It really looks pretty good shape overall, and you think, well, what's such a big deal? Well, there you go. I'll show you what the big deal is. That's part of the big deal, and it's a pretty big deal. And the other part that's a pretty big deal is this part up here on the neck, and that's been hack job together too. That's been re-glued already, which is not a good thing. It would be so much nicer if it hadn't been touched. So much easier. I want to try to fix this all up around here. You can't hide that completely, there's no way, but you can improve the looks of it and make it look halfway decent, and that's where we're headed. You know, if we can just get her back together, get her in playable condition, and more or less going to keep the look and the patina, not going to change much of that because, well, you just don't want to do that. The other thing is we got some parts here. A couple of little chips of wood are in the bag as well. This tailpiece is an original tailpiece, and it's got that, oh, that type of plastic, I can't think of it again, that they used to use in cue balls and all kinds of things back around the 1920s back then. It's the kind that they made nitrate type plastics. Anyway, they disintegrate over time. This one's pulled and bowed pretty badly. Let's see if I can get it out and show you. I don't know if I can really salvage this tailpiece or not. I mean, I think he really wants it. If you look at how bowed it is, number one, that's the wire, and then how bowed that piece is as well. And it's not just bowed this way, which that's the norm, but it's twisted up, and that's the problem. The strings aren't going to stay in it very good when they're pulling out over the back, you know, and it really needs to be bent back. And if you try to bend these wires, I'm pretty sure we'd break the plastic. So, I don't know. It is what it is, as they say. Certainly it's salvageable one way or another. I'm just not sure it's salvageable with this original part. But we won't know until we try hooking it up and see what it does. It may work, I don't know. It just doesn't look like it will right now. It's got the old bridge with it too, which is pretty darn cool. It's a real old style bridge that's with it. That hole there, if you're wondering what that hole's for, that's where the pin from the elevated pick guard would go through that hole there. This probably, I haven't looked yet, but it's probably got holes in the side of this. Sure enough, it does. I can see them in the camera. It's got holes here, so the pins went in here from the pick guard, came around here, and then there's another hole that went through the bridge. There's probably a hole on the side here somewhere. I don't see it though in the camera. Let me look and see if somebody's covered it over. Well, this one may have had the clamps. Instead of the hole for screwing it into the side, it may have had the clamp type pick guard that would clamp on the sides. And that may have been what this had, although I don't see much scarring from that either. The only other option would be that it just was connected here and at the bridge, and I don't think that's the way they did it, so I don't know. I sure don't see any other scarring. I can see where the finish, some kind of repair was done, or glue. I think it was glue. Now that I look at it, I think it's glue. And there's glue run down all down the sides here. You can possibly see that. I think you can see it a little bit. So there's some messes that way too. The challenge is, sure, come on and be a luthier. just like the shirt says, luthier, because superhero is just not a real job title. So, you know, we'll just see what we can do with it. It's going to be a fun trip. Come along for the ride. My friends, somebody wiser than me, a long time ago said, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one small step. We're ready to take that small step. Here we go. I think what I'm going to do is start in this area, and just because that area bugs me more than any of the rest of it. Mostly because this was done by the act of man here, you know, just a careless, silly act, I think. I'm going to try to fill this in, but it's going to be a tough fill. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know, make it worse before I make it better. You know, it's got so much, I don't know, just filth on it, really. I'm going to just clean up to bare wood, get it perfectly square as well as I can, and then just fill it in with some more wood. I have to be careful back here because I'm getting into the inlay, and they've got into the corner of the inlay in both places, and I don't want to do that. So I think what I'll do is I'll actually undercut that part and let my piece go in undercut too, so that I don't get into the inlay. So I'm holding the file at a direct angle for that purpose. And the problem here too, again, if I file flat this way, I'm going to cut out some more of that inlay, so I'm just going to have to let this kind of run at a slight angle to clean it up. I've got bare wood showing there now. Sometimes you have to get these things at different angles so that you can work on them better. And I have to get this up here where I can see this edge. I really want to cut all the wore out part away so that it'll be clean wood. I don't know if you can see down in there, but there's new, fresh, clean wood in there now. Try to turn it at an angle where you can see it. And now that's clean and good dry wood, and I can glue new pieces of wood to that, and it should hold very well. I don't think it'll be susceptible to falling out or anything. Assuming I can get it in there good and tight. That's a, you know, a big issue right there. So I'm gonna, off camera, try to make a little piece of wood, and I'll show you what that looks like, and then we'll put it in here. I've cut me some wood that will, you know, be approximately the thickness of this top, a little bit more than I need. I've got my little mechanical pencil here, which should help me trace this real well. It's got to have a fine tracing, and I'm lining up the grain with the grain in this piece so that it looks straight, you know, just by eye. As DeResta says, if it looks straight, it is straight. So I'm trying to make it look straight to my eye, and that looks pretty straight. And I'm going to then trace this shape. I'm going to trace the curvature shape here too a little bit. And of course, as always, when we cut that out, we're going to cut that out just slightly proud of the thing that we need, and just sneak up on it and get it to fit in there really tight. Now this white wood obviously isn't going to match this dark color that they've got on here, and I don't have any wood that's going to match that, so you know, this is the same kind of wood, and the width of the grain is even fairly similar. That's why I chose this piece. So it should look fairly good when we get it in there and get it stained. Well, nothing like having them fit perfect the first try. Really, it does. It fits just about perfect. So I'm not going to mess with that, but I am going to try to draw in here freehand the line that we need to cut this to in order to get the binding back in here. Again, it's just a look thing. That fits just like a glove, so I'm happy with that. Now I'll make that little fine cut across there so that we can glue the binding to that. Well, I'm getting lucky on this one here. Everything's fitting just perfect, so I'm going to go ahead and count my blessings and just glue it into place. It's hard to tell, but on the inside, I can't feel it at all. It's perfectly smooth. Now the top is a little bit proud, but it's easier to work on the top than it is on the inside. So I'm going to leave the inside smooth, leave the top proud of the surface, and we'll clean it up after this glue sets. Just about got this one ready to go in the slot here, so I'm going to put the glue on it and get it in place. This one fits better coming in from the bottom side. A couple of these little diamond or square shapes are missing, so I just made myself a piece of maple that was in the same shape, and I think when we cut them off and put them in there, I don't think anyone will be able to tell these from what's in there. At least that's my thought, and this is much easier to fix, and I was able to square that up on my little tiny thickness sander and get them to the exact same size and shape. So they look like they're going to fit just perfectly like so. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut some of these off to length, put them in there, and fill in around it, I guess, is the best I can think of to do. Question is, how am I going to cut them off to length? I think you can see I've got the two little pieces cut off and I stuck them down in there. There's a lot more open area there, but I'm just going to put a drop of CA glue down in here. Well, hopefully try to glue all this loose stuff back down, including this loose black parts that are in here. I'm just going to try to hold them in place, glue everything at once. Well, that's down in there. It's not perfect yet. It's headed towards a nice look, I think. I don't know how to fix the rest of this. It's just a little too tedious to try to fill individual pieces of wood in that mess, I think. The time frame that we're working with and the budget that we've got, I think I just need to take and fill the rest of that with filler, and we'll just have to dye it black. I think that's the best way to approach the rest of it. In order to fill this little area right down here, I'm going to take some of the Timbermate wood filler and a little bit of dye. I've got some dark brown dye and I'm going to put into this. I'm going to start with that. We can always go darker, putting several drops in there, and I'll mix it up with a little stick, get it really dark, smear it around, because the more you smear it, the more the color works into it. This looks like this is going to be a reasonably close match, but we might have to touch it up with some more dye later. I'm going to use a pointer stick to fill the area, so I'll bring you down here where you can see it a little better. While I've got this stuff made up, I'm going to fill in around these two blocks that I put in here, because there's little tiny holes around those as well, and I think this filler will be a perfect match for that as well. Notice in here there's a place where the purfling has popped up. I don't know if that'll go back down or not. Try this tool, see if we can force it back down in there. Yeah, it went back down in there. And then I'll take the thin CA glue and see if it'll penetrate into that area right there. Gotta be careful. Here's where you make your big mistakes. No matter how careful you are, it just runs everywhere. And you know, keeping the bottle down and just forcing it up out the end, and it still just runs everywhere. But it's penetrating down into the pores where all that's loose, and I think that'll stay now. The trick is to just wipe it back off as quick as you can, and you can barely tell you've done anything, and that should hold that in place. The rest of it looks pretty good. I think after my filler dries and we clean this all up, it's actually going to look halfway decent. Of course, we got to get some binding to fill in those slots there too. And there's a piece of binding cut out in a semicircle under here, which I suspect a wire or something went for the pickup went that way. We'll see if we can fill that in too. I don't know if we can or not, but we'll give it a shot. Looks like they did it up here too, now that I see it. I hadn't noticed it, but it's on this side as well, so it's on both sides. It must have been something to do with the pickup that they put in here. Anyway, we'll see what we can do. Now it's time for some cleanup on this guitar, so I've got my chisel here. I'm hoping I can cut the little diamonds back now and trim them down flush. The only problem with that is that this is in grain, so it will be a little harder to cut. But these chisels are pretty sharp, so I think it'll work.
two I put in there at the moment aren't as white, but that's because they're wet. I think when they dry back out, they'll turn a little whiter. I think it's going to look pretty good. It's going to be a fairly close match to what was there, and we can pretty that up a little bit more as we go. I'm going to work on these chips now and cut them down to the surface. It's all a work in progress, as they say. This will shave a little easier because this is flat sawn instead of in grain. And I'm not sure how it looks in the camera, but this is not flat. This is a domed top. So we're really carving this on a dome or a circle, a semicircle, if you will.
Classic small town Norman Rockwell scene. They talk about the wheres and whens, a little gossip.
Looking a little better. Each step makes it a little bit better, but we've got a ways to go yet. Well, I went looking for some old binding that would be similar to this, and fact is it's going to be hard to come up with. But I've got some binding here that is discolored a little bit. On this side it's real yellow. This was the outside of the binding, I'm sure, and I may scrape that coating off there because it's probably got lacquer on it. But anyway, if I turn it with that side out, I think it's going to work okay. It's got a black lining on this one side. I think I'm going to put that proud of the surface and then just scrape that off once I get it glued into place. That's my goal anyway. I've cut it a little bit long so that I should be able to get it to fit in there tightly. I'm hoping that I can actually get it to wedge in there where it'll clamp itself in there. Can't guarantee that part yet, but by cutting it a little bit long and then by using some files on it, I think I can make that happen. I will put this in a little vise and just square up the end real good and crisp, and then try to get it where it'll just force itself into the crack. So that's where I'm headed here. You can probably see I've got a piece stuck in there. It sort of self-holds. I wish I'd have got it just a tiny bit tighter. It is tight enough to hold itself in there. I'm going to give that a shot, and we're going to try to glue that in place and see how that goes. Well, I went ahead off camera and glued this piece in, and you can see that little black binding strip is on top, which I think I can scrape right off. I have that flush with the top of the instrument, and I used this Beacon 527 glue. This kind of glue is the old style that melts the plastic, and this is the old plastic which will melt, and I believe this piece that I found was old, and I believe it melts, and it all seemed to stick together really good, so that kind of melts it together, and then hopefully after a little while we can scrape this black off and it should just look like one continuous piece. That's the hope. We'll see how it goes. Not the best camera angle for this, but you can see I've got the new piece of fill binding in there. I'm just eyeballing how much I'm going to have to cut off. I've got a little pencil mark on there already. Did that off camera, but what I'm going to do is take my chisel and I'm just going to chop off just the end of it, just a little bit. The goal is to sneak up on it. And you keep doing a trial and error fitting until you get where you think you can force it in there. And it helps if you don't drop it in there. I can barely get my hand through that hole for sure. I think I'm going to cut it off the other end this time. I think this is going to go together better if I stick that end in first and force this end in, my end in last. Just based on the way the binding is cut there. Boy, that's getting very close. I could almost force that. I'm going to take one more hair off of it. And I mean, it's not even a full hair. Yeah, might have cut more than I wanted there. Yeah, I did. I probably cut more than I wanted there. Well, it's really hard to do. I probably should have just filed it there when I got it that close. I'll cut a new piece and I'll bring you back and show you what that looks like here when I get a better piece made. Well, I did a little better job making this piece to go in here, and it actually wedges in from the top and slides right down in there. Might as well go ahead and put it in. I've already test fitted. I know it's going to work, or at least I believe it will. So I'm going to go ahead and get the glue on here. Again, this is the Beacon 527, which will melt the old plastic. I kind of got ahead of myself there just a little bit. I forgot to scrape off the old finish on the back side of this. So to do that, it's pretty quick. You just lay it down, hold it with your finger, scrape that yellow off. It comes off pretty easily. It's just an old finish is what it is. You can see it comes off really fast. I'll scrape it off the bottom edge too. Not that anybody will ever see that because it'll be on the inside of the guitar on the bottom, but I would know it's there, and now it's not there. Now I just got to get a little bit of the glue on the ends, especially a little bit on the back side. That just starts the melting process when you put the glue directly on the plastic. And then you just fit it into the hole. It's not that easy, but should slide down in there because it's yeah, the glue softened it up a lot, and it really goes in there easy now. And then I'll wipe the extra glue off, and then I just look at the bottom edge and try to get the bottom edge level, because that's what you're going to see in there. And then the top we can scrape level later. That looks really good. We'll give that, an hour to set up and get hard and dry on these two pieces before we try to clean up the top. Meanwhile, while that's drying, I'll see if I can't figure out a way to fix these problems. Now, the thing about those are, they're semi-holes. I mean, I could cut them up through the top, but it's nice to have the top in one piece, see, and you don't even see it along the top then. I would prefer to just fill the hole if I can. That's a big, tall order, though. I got to be honest with you. I'm not sure I can do it that way, just because there's really no structure there to glue to other than the old plastic. And if I could get an exact piece to fit, I probably could glue it. But they've cut the wood out behind it, so there's nothing to glue to there either. If I could find a way to put the wood back in there first, that is not an easy fix. Just not simple at all. But I'll do what I can, and when I figure that out, I'll let you see what I figured out. Well, I've come up with a plan on how to fix these holes underneath here. I took a piece of this rod, which I'm going to say is 5/16 to 3/8. I didn't measure it, but it looked like it was about the right size of the semicircle they cut out of here. And they drilled it out at an angle, so it leaves a mark in the top of the guitar on the inside that's shaped like this. So I just cut at an angle off the end of this and made this piece. And then I put it in there, and then I pushed it in until it felt flush on the inside, like so. And once I get it flush on the inside like that, and I don't know if the camera shows you what I'm doing there, but it feels like it's flush with the roof inside. It feels perfectly smooth. In fact, I'm going to now draw a pencil mark right here at the front edge of this, and I'm going to have to saw it off behind that pencil mark in order for the thickness of the binding. So basically, I'm going to use the bandsaw saw blade width to shorten this piece approximately the thickness of this binding. So it'll be back behind this binding a little bit when I get it in there. And then I should be able to cut a little piece of half moon binding to fit in there and glue it in place, and this will be the backer for it. So I'm thinking it'll work, but only a little time and patience will tell. Well, I think this is going to work. That's the little tiny piece I had to make, whoops, to fill this weird shaped hole over here. And of course this just fills the hole on the one side. Hopefully you can see it. And I'm going to use the old trusty tight bond and a little clamp to hold it in place. And we'll have to let that set up and get hard before we try to put binding back in there. But I think this is going to work. Once you get it in the right place, it seems to move on me. We'll just have to let that sit and do its thing. I'll be working on the other side and try to make a piece for it. Well, the other piece is really tiny also that I have to fit in there, and we're going to make it work right now, I hope anyway. Cover it in glue, slide it into place. Hopefully it'll stay there. Get another clamp on it if we can. This one may take a different kind of clamp because they're gonna bump each other. Well, that's gonna have to do. It's the best I can do with what I got to work with. So we've just about got the sound hole area restored on this thing. I would say it's gonna look real good when we're done. Considering what it looked like originally, it's about as good as it could be fixed, I think. My friends, this has been sitting for several hours. I'm pretty happy with the way this is all turning out. You can barely feel that at all through there. I haven't trimmed this one up quite as far yet. I'm cutting off the dark plastic that's on the top with the chisel. And then you can scrape it like so to clean it up. Take a half round file and clean it up with that. Again, now you can barely even feel anything. Actually, I can't really feel it at all. I just know it's there. Now it's just that it's a lot brighter looking than the rest of it. So if I could, stain it a little bit. A lot of people have mentioned tea and coffee and those kinds of things, and that's doable possibly. We don't drink coffee at all here, so I don't have any coffee to work with. I do have my leather dyes, and I can actually use them and lighten them up and make them match this pretty well, I believe. So that's what I'm going to try. I've got the dark brown leather dye. I don't mind just putting it on there. Even if it doesn't match, you can take it right back off fairly easy with alcohol. So it doesn't bother me too much to just experiment right on the instrument. I've done it for so long and understand what's going to happen here. That's really not too bad. It's a little dark on the plastic, but then again, you can take a little piece of sandpaper and very lightly sand the plastic, and I think lighten it up just enough.
Now and then about who's doing what, maybe why.
By no means perfect, but you can see the difference. It's quite a bit better. And I'll have maybe Caleb or someone else look at it later, Melissa or someone, and see if there's a suggestion on color that we can go with that will work better. But right now that's pretty close. It's in the ballpark. Well, it's, not perfect, but like I said, you don't expect to be able to hide something like that completely. But that's, at first glance, it doesn't look too bad. We're going to work on it some more, though. I'm not totally satisfied with it yet, but we're going to move on from that for now. I may come back and try to fill in these plastic parts here a little later, too, and they're not filled in yet. We'll get to them later. Because I'm worried about this, the binding's loose all the way around this thing, and the back is loose and it's broken out. The panels are loose from the tail plate. It's just a real wreck back in this whole area. So I've got a lot of work and a lot of studying to do to decide how I'm going to fix that. I'm going to take the little camera, go inside this guitar and do some inspection. I've got the screen turned around where you can see what the camera sees. As you can see, I'm pointing the camera around here. If I point the camera back at the camera, well, then you can see the camera. But anyway, my point is I'm going to go inside the guitar because I think this thing has some very serious problems back in there, and I may have to just go ahead and take the back off this. I didn't really want to go that deep, but we may have to. So hopefully we can both see what's going on in there by looking at that screen. We're inside the guitar there now, and you can probably see the holes in the back of the guitar there that you could throw a dog through. That's the tail block and the hole in the tail block there that you can see that white spot. I'm trying to get closer. This cord is so stiff on this thing. It's really hard to control. I want to get closer. It's really hard to tell. It's even hard for me to tell, let alone for you guys on your screen there. I wonder if I can make this screen brighter. Close that for the moment and see if I can. Well, the screen's already pretty bright. Maybe that's too bright. Try going a little darker. See if that helps. Okay, so there's some of the kerfing that maybe you can see. That's where it starts. It's missing all the way around. It's really missing a long way. That's all the way to the tail block there. Yeah, it's really hard to control this. Try to go from the other side, see how much is missing. It's missing from there, right there, over to the tail block, which is right there. So several inches. That's just on the bottom. I think the top may be missing something too. I'm not really sure. The top is loose right here, I can tell. Well, the cameras are good and bad. Sometimes you can see good with the camera. In this particular case, not so much. I don't think the camera is really all that definitive, but I do see down in there, and it's really not in very good shape. So I think I'm just going to take the back off, as bad as I hate to do it. I'm hoping that taking the back off somehow will even help me with this neck joint too, because this neck joint is going to be a real bummer. Typically taking the top off would be better, but I'm just hoping that I can, see something there. Just hope against hope. I don't think that's going to help, but you never know. Sometimes these things are made weird, and maybe we'll have some access into the neck joint through here too. That would be nice, because this is going to be a real problem to fix this too. I don't really want to take all of this apart, up through here, knowing what we know about this whole area. This thing is a wreck. But it's going to be good when we're done. The one real problem with taking the back off a guitar like this is this binding. Typically on these really old instruments, one of two things happens on the binding. Either it just breaks like glass everywhere and it's just crap, or it turns to dust, literally turns to powder and just crumbles into nothing. This one is quite different in that most of the binding is loose. Well, I shouldn't say most, because actually it's not most, but almost half of it is loose. Where it's not loose, the back is coming loose from the sides anyway. I don't want to break the binding any more than I have to, but the odds are it's going to break somewhere. And I'm going to try really hard to get it off without breaking it. Got one of my little scalpel tools here from my old buddy Chuck, who watches the channel. I don't really need to get it loose back here because the block itself is loose from the top. So the block would come out with the back, but I'm just trying ever so carefully to see if I can get the rest of this binding loose by just wiggling down through here. It'd be really nice if all the binding would just come loose and then I could put it back on. But it honestly, the rest of it doesn't seem so loose like it is everywhere else. The rest of it seems pretty tight. If I just keep doing this though and don't get in any big hurry, I'm gaining an 1/8 of an inch every couple of minutes here. So it'll take a while. There we go. There we go. It was stuck to that block still. Now we're moving a little bit. These scalpels are really good for this kind of thing because their blades don't crack and break like the X-Acto knives can. Oh my goodness. I got a little progress there, but I'm so afraid I'm going to break it because this kind of thing typically just breaks. But so far so good. There we go. It's coming loose. If we can get the binding off, that gives me a lot more access to the joint to get the back off. Kind of amazed that this binding is holding together as well as it is. Uh-oh, here's a spot where it looks like it might be wanting to break. No, we got past it. It's working ever so slowly, but it's working. Well, you can see my process here, and I still got to go about here to about here, and I'm going to do the rest of that off camera, and I'll show you what it looks like when I get the binding off. Well, if you had asked me if I could get this off in one piece, all the way around back to here, I would have said not a chance. But so far it is in one piece. But the hardest part hasn't been done yet, and that's this piece right here behind this little, I don't know, tab or nut or whatever you want to call it. It's a cap that goes on the end of the heel cap there.
I don't know if I can get the rest of it out, but it gives me access by lifting it up. I can see the seam here. I have the scalpel in the seam. So I'm going to try as carefully as possible, keep going through that seam and see if we can open up the seam. I may have to get the knife heated up and things like that in order for that to happen. I'm just going to keep working this all the way around and hopefully we can get it to separate. And I'll show you the progress as I go along. I have my bridge removal tool heating up here, heating the tools up so that I can slip them in the joint of the back here. It's hard to get all this in camera. When you get those good and hot, they tend to cut the glue joint a lot better. And that's what we're trying to do here. It's going to fight me all the way, I think, but I'm going to get it apart eventually. I've got it up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going to work eventually, but it's going to make me work for it to get it there. So I'm just going to be repeating this process for probably 30 or 40 minutes here. So I'm going to quit filming and I'll show you what it looks like when we get it apart. Well, I'm making good progress. On the other side, I've got the back loose all the way around to the upper bout. We're not through the neck block yet, but we're getting close to that on that other side. So I thought I'd bring this side around to make it match. It's fighting me pretty much every step of the way. It really doesn't want to come apart. That part of it is glued really well, but it really does need to come apart so that we can put it back together correctly, because it's just in bad shape. This side seems even tighter than the other side, and the other side seemed near impossible. Again, I'm going to quit filming and just concentrate on getting this apart, and it's really tough. Well, my friends, I'm working through this sound hole trying to get these blades down into the neck block, and I've got some success, but I gotta be honest, it's not much success considering how hard I'm working here. I've got about a third of the neck block loose, maybe almost half. So hopefully this one will make the difference here. Not so much. I wish it would have. Oh. It's really, I'm really straining on it, pushing as hard as I can push just about. I'm afraid I'm going to break something. So far the binding's still in one piece. I'd say the odds are slim it's going to stay that way. Now I've got both ends of the neck block loose. Now the middle is what I'm working on. When I say loose, I just mean I can get the knife in there. I don't think they're exactly loose yet. Wow. I'm heating the knife up is what I'm reaching for here. It's got to be close to saying okay. It hasn't said it yet. Now that I've got the inside parts of the block loose, I'm going to try on the outside here again, see if I can get in there. Try to help myself a little bit here with a wedge to hold this side up and open where I can get in there quicker. There we go. Well, it came loose. I see it broke. It broke in a place I didn't really want it to break, but you know, you got to do something sometimes. We did something, so we got it loose. You know, it did break right there, but man, I'll tell you what, I don't think you could have done it much better, really. It's as hard as that was to get loose. That's another one of my peeves about hide glue. It's not necessarily that consistent from one batch to the next. You know, one set of sides will just pop loose, no problem, or just unglue with the heat. The next set won't budge. And this was one of those that didn't want to budge at all. But we got it done. Now we can start our cleanup and start working towards fixing this baby up. Well, my friends, we've got this thing apart, and you can see the dirt and filth inside there, I think. This piece of lining here, this kerfit lining, is re-glued in place there. That's not loose. The tail block is still glued to the back here. Part of it is. Of course, you can see it's broken half. I can see a serial number there. I'm going to let you guys look at it. I've brushed it off to get the dust off of it. For me reading it, what I'm reading is 47517. That first number is difficult. In fact, it might not even be a 4. There's a chance there's another number in front of it, so it could be a number, then a 475. The other possibility is that the 4 is not really a 4 at all, the way it looks here. It could almost be a 5 or something. It's really hard to explain that, but it does look weird. Now that I look at it with my naked eye, it almost looks like it's 3475517. But honestly, I don't have any way to know for sure. I may try to get my microscope down and really blow it up and see if I can tell. It's really hard to tell. So anyway, that part is off, and now look in the inside of the back. And this is pretty cool. It's kind of disgusting in a way. I think you can see some mouse pellets in there. There's little beetle cocoon type things like this right here. They were stuck down to places and I pried them loose. There's some sort of a beetle cocoon or something along those lines. You know, there's just a ton of problems in here. This long brace here is loose. It looks like something was spilled in here a long time ago, this dark color, and it almost looks like it's an oil of some sort. You can see my little repairs that I did from the outside, and I'm amazed how well, especially these half-round ones, fit and filled the space from the other side. Of course, it had been easier to do it with the back off. At that time, I wasn't sure I was taking the back off. But either way, they got fixed. And I'm happy with the way they look from the inside, so we're good. But we're gonna have to do some major cleanup here and start the build back. It's really a shame that this had to break right here on the edge, because only a 3/8 of an inch further in, it would have been in the center, and that's where the seam is. So I need to get the rest of this loose and lay this aside so I don't break this stuff. But I have a feeling this part here is gonna come apart in at least 2 more pieces. I'm hoping only 2 more pieces, but it could come apart in more. It's really glued down tight. It's amazing how tight. In fact, it's so tight, I think I'm gonna try to saw it with my little razor saw. I don't think I can get it apart any other way. This way I might get it apart in 1 piece, so I'm gonna give it a shot. This little razor saw is such a fine kerf that you can't really even hardly see the cut line. Just in case you haven't seen a razor saw, look at the teeth on that. You really can't even see them. They're that small. Tiniest little teeth you can imagine. Very tiny. You can see them, but they are so tiny it's almost impossible to see. I believe I'm to the depth. Now I'm going to try to pry it out of there somehow. It's down a little bit below this neck block too, which makes it much more difficult. If it was even with the top of the neck block, we could get to the joint very easily, but it's slightly below the neck block. It just doesn't want to cooperate in any way, shape, or form. No, it doesn't want to give. You would think I could break it over with the saw blade a little bit, but I'm afraid I'm going to bend my saw blade. Maybe I can take a razor blade, slide it in the slot, and break it over. Now that both sides are free, it's just the bottom edge holding it. Yeah, you would think that would work, but it doesn't seem to. Doesn't want to give. Just the bottom edge of that is glued at this point. It's free on both sides. It's just the bottom edge. That to give you some idea how tough this was to get apart all the way around. Well, I can already tell you it's going to come apart in 2 pieces, because where it goes from here to the center, it's coming apart separately, I can tell. And so I may as well go ahead and take that part apart. I knew that was going to happen. But that's not a huge loss in that these two match up still, and we can put that seam back together. I just don't want to lose that piece. Put it in a little tray over there. Now if we can just get this part apart without breaking it again, we'll be pretty good. I think we're about to get it. Famous last words sometimes. Man, it's not going to give up without a fight. Oh my gosh. Can't believe it's that hard. That is amazing how hard that is. Little pieces we're talking about here. I don't know if you can see what we're talking about, but just that much is glued on the bottom and it won't come loose. It is just as tight as it can be. This scalpel blade is a little bit more flexible. Maybe I can get it under there and cut at an angle. There it is, finally. Finally. So we got it apart in two pieces. This one giant piece and one little tiny piece. And trust me, I'll take that. I'm excited to actually have the back off this thing finally so I can really get into it. As you can see, there's so many problems with all this broke out back here, and you know, everything's loose from the top, but there's a loose brace right here, and this is broken, so I can't really fix these sides till we get that fixed. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this brace, get this brace glued back in place and clamped, and let that set on its own. Then I think I'm going to take the rest of this block off of the back because it's partially loose from the back anyway, and I'm going to glue that back together to the other part of the tail block and get that glued up. So I'm going to get those two things glued up first, the brace and the tail block, and then we'll take the next step, whatever that is. We're going to start by getting glue under this. I've already vacuumed it out and swept it out as best I can. It never hurts to just double check everything and make sure everything's clean under there. So I'm going to just take something and just go under there and scrape it a little bit and see if there's any glue or anything. It feels like it matches up pretty good, and I don't feel anything in there. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. And it's really difficult to find something that fits under there really well anyway. Here's a ruler, and sometimes just something like that will go in there and clean it out a little bit. It feels pretty clean. So that ruler there has just got a good square flat edge with rounded corners, so I can go in there without scratching anything and knock any loose particles out of there. Now I'm going to just squirt the glue right along this edge, back under there as much as I can, and I'll do it on this side too. I'm gonna have more glue than I need for sure. Then I'll take a paintbrush and work it around underneath there and get it back in there as far as I can. These are the things you don't want to skimp on. You want to get as much glue in there as you can, and you can see the squeeze out, so obviously I got a lot of glue under there, making sure I got the end good as I got the rest of it. Okay, so I'm going to wipe some of that off with some water first, and then we're going to clamp it down. It's going to be a lot more squeeze out when I clamp this down. I've got this cheap Harbor Freight clamp, and I say cheap just because they are inexpensive. What I like about this clamp is it's got the quick release, so you can pull it up and push it down and then start tightening from wherever you are. It's really a handy little clamp. They're inexpensive. If you need clamps, these are really nice. Now these are very heavy, a little overkill for this job, but the reason I'm using it is partly because of the quick release and partly because it's tall enough to reach over this tall side and still get down to this brace. Now I've already got good leather on the other side of the clamp. I have it glued to the clamp. And now we'll just get it down here, put some leather on this brace, and hopefully get it centered. Now this is the tricky part, is getting it to center on that brace, because it's got a wobble to the head of the clamp there. And that seems to be working. And I'll put another one there. And again, that quick release feature really is nice for something like this. Now the problem with my pads is they're so big that they're going to make it hard for me to get rid of the glue. But I do think that's clamped down really well. I don't think it could be much better. So now we'll clean up the glue. What I usually do on something like this is I take some water, wet the paintbrush down, make sure it's relatively dry, and then clean it off into an old rag like that. Wash the paintbrush out again, dry it off, clean it out like that. It's important to do that fairly quickly because the glue will start to set up and it's harder to remove if you wait very long. I think I'm going to take this one back off because I can't get under it very good. I can get under this one pretty easily. This one's not too bad because the brace is taller here. It's not hard to clean under that one, but it is hard to clean under the other one at the end. So I'm going to take this one back off, clean it up again, and then put it back on. And there's still a little bit more squeeze out there I have to deal with, but not nearly as much. I think that'll work. We'll let that set a while, and I'll turn my attention to the tail block. Okay, turning my attention now to this that has itself re-glued in there, and I don't know how that happened. Can't even imagine. It's not going to be hard to get out. Oh, yes it is. Look at there, it broke right in half, wouldn't you know? Not a big deal though, because I mean it was already broken. But we'll save that and reuse that someplace in the guitar, I'm sure. Keeping all the spare parts in a baggie like this too, by the way, just so you know. And now we get to take this off of here. It would be really nice if it would just come the rest of the way without a fight. But so far, nothing has been real easy on this guitar, so I'm not gonna hold my breath expecting that to happen. See if it'll let me just pry it off of there without having to get out the heat. Yeah, it popped off, no problem. Now there's locating nails here, or maybe they're rusted off screws from the tailpiece. That's possibly what they are. There's metal pins right here. I'm going to go with maybe they are rusted off screws from the tailpiece. So I'm going to try to unscrew them here with a pair of pliers. Actually, I think they are nails. They are nails, they're not screws. So because they're nails, I'm going to go to these and use them as to lift them out of there. And you can see it is a nail. I'm not even for sure why they had them there, but I would say it was somehow to tack the sides to this while they were gluing it up. That's my guess. I don't really know. Well, I can't get a hold of that one. So I'll go to my fret pulling pliers. That ought to get it out of there. Yep, that did it. So there you go. We had 2 souvenir nails. I don't think those will be going back in, so I'm going to throw those away. But I am going to clean this block up and then get it ready to glue back in place on the other block. And to clean it up on the bottom side here on the flat side, I'm just going to take a razor blade and start with that and see if that works. And I can tell you that's not going to work on that stuff. That stuff's really hard. So I've got my little finger plane and I'm just going to pick off the hard stuff, or try to, with the finger plane. And that's working. Got rid of most of it already. Okay, that's pretty good. Now I can probably use this okay. Well, that cleans up the important parts. That's where the glue's going to go, in here. And I think it's interesting note that if you look at that closely, hopefully the camera will focus there, it is toothed. So they did take a toothed blade and they did scrape it like that with a toothed blade. So, you know, the technique you've seen me do, they did that as well back in the early part of the 20th century, back in the 1918, 1920 time frame when this thing was built, post World War I. Anyway, we just toothed it a little bit to refresh it, and they did tooth this top side too. This goes to where the top is connected. Or, no, I take it back. This goes to where the back is connected. They did have this toothed as well, and so we'll re-tooth it a little bit. The difference is that we're going to use a glue that won't turn loose. I have no idea what caused this to break in half, but I would imagine it was traumatic. I imagine it was dropped or something, which is probably why the whole back end of it is busted out. I'm going to clean out this little slot. This is from a beetle or something. It's some kind of a cocoon type deal. Throw all that away. I don't think we need to save that. That looks clean enough to put it back together. So here we go.